What the hell is up, world of podcasters? Even more specific to my true crime lovers. My name is Shay Baby.
And I'm Charlie.
And welcome to
We the Jury Podcast. So this is primarily going to be a true crime podcast. And the case that we are bringing to you today is a biggie. And it is from where we are, which is...
Florida.
The
Sunshine State, baby. Also, Did you know that Florida is the meth capital?
It is.
Of the United States.
And it has been running for a long time. Yep, we got meth.
We're also the lightning state.
Lightning, meth. We got gators. We got the mosquitoes.
Lots of drugs, lots of crime. We have Grady Judd. So in the summer, when I went to New York, I got to meet a lot of my boyfriend's family, and they asked just where I was from, and I told them I was close by Tampa and Orlando, and they were like, "Oh my God, you're from Polk County? You know Grady Judd? Have you ever met him?" And I'm like, what? I'm like, how are people all the way up in New York knowing about Grady Judd like that? But I mean, he is really controversial. He's all over Facebook and TikTok and everything else.
Florida is just one of those states where, and we have both listened to a lot of true crime podcasts, and it genuinely cracks me up when I hear all of their general opinions of Florida. How Florida's got to be the
really
heat.
Like it or they really hate it.
Yes, I was gonna say yes. So we've seen some things. We've been through some things
We've
here.
Experienced lots of things.
We're some Florida gals, real and true. We walk around barefoot. We like sweet tea, folks.
Hold up. I don't walk around barefoot.
Oh, I do.
That's a big thing about me. Mario will let y'all know right now. I am a socks girl. Okay, I have to wear Now,
really?
When I go to the beach, I'll have my toes out and everything like that, but walking around the concrete in the dirt, absolutely not my Tim.
I would go everywhere in life barefoot if I could.
Damn, she said, well.
Yep.
Well.
Okay, so before we launch into our first big case for you guys, and when I say big, it's big. This guy is big, but it's also big because your girls put in work for this first episode. A month's worth of research for you guys. We are so excited to be here doing this. We definitely want to get to know you guys throughout our journey. At the end of our episode, we are going to provide you with our email, which we will be monitoring personally. We'll also be including our Instagram, and you are definitely going to want to hop on that, folks, because after each episode, we intend to post any interesting photos that may correlate, any,
teasers.
Yes, that sort of thing. Gives you some mental pictures to go with what you just heard about.
Right.
But okay.
Get involved with us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Request things.
Yes.
We want to know what your curious mind wants to know more about.
Yeah,
Please.
absolutely. We do. So and not only true crime cases, like I said, this is primarily a true crime podcast. We are going to dabble in some urban legends. I love haunted places, haunted mansions, abandoned asylums, the paranormal.
Paranormal activity. Definitely thing I'm excited for.
Definitely some unsolved cases, cold cases. Definitely going to get into those. Generally, anything and everything spooky.
All right, so diving into our very first case, Charlie is hot over here.
I'm sorry, I am we're in my closet. We're in my closet recording. We should probably just tell them that. We're
to give you a picture of what it looks like right now.
Well, we should post one to our Instagram, our little setup here.
Yeah, we can.
We will. We'll do that for you. You get to see the start of it all, okay? Because
check out our first post on Instagram.
And when we're really big, okay, we'll remember our roots.
This moment.
Right here in this hot closet.
Our heinies on the floor, bones hurting.
I have 3 cats, a dog, and a child downstairs.
Charlie's got a Mountain Dew today. Not a normal Tito's.
No,
I got a little Ultra sitting right beside me.
I wasn't ready to slur for you guys yet.
No, but we also we might have other things for you guys too, little bloopers. All right, I know you don't really care about all the other extra stuff we're over here geeking off about, but we are going to be discussing one of the world's most notorious serial killers. He actually was one of the first of his kind here in the United States, which is what made him so big. And that is going to be Theodore Robert Cowell, a.k.a. I know you want to say it, Charlie.
I do. Ted freaking Bundy, man.
Ted Bundy.
Now, okay.
Ted Bundy.
It's not cliche that we're coming at you first with Ted Bundy. We know he's a big one. We're gonna cover all the in-betweens, not just the big ones.
I know what you're about to say.
Okay, but we us prideful folk down here.
Us
Prideful folk down here, okay? We fried his ass. Okay, Florida fried Ted Bundy's ass. In case you didn't know, Sparky the electric chair, we Floridians, we took care of that. Okay, because
we don't play down here, baby.
We don't play. And a couple states let him go before he got here, and we're gonna get into that. So, yes, our first case, Ted Bundy. And my girl Shay Baby is going to launch into
the shit.
The shit. She's going to start from the beginning.
So I'm going to I want to give you guys just a little background. There might be some information that I may repeat, but I just really want to get this into your brain. That way you're not confused, because we're going to be talking a lot.
Like essential deets?
Essential details. Yes.
Got it. Okay.
So what you need to know about Theodore Robert Cowell is obviously his name later became Ted Bundy. He was adopted. He was born on November 24th, 1946.
Whose birthday is that?
That's my fucking birthday.
That's Shay Baby's birthday. 1946?
Out of all the celebrities and people that I share a birthday with, it's got to be Ted Bundy. Really?
Honestly,
there's a couple others. I share a birthday with Katherine Heigl.
I would psych out. I would psych out a little bit if if I had the same oh my gosh,
birthday as a
same birthday
killer?
As a serial. Yeah, I would. Yeah, that honestly, I would tell everyone.
I'm not a serial killer, guys. Okay, but
no,
he's a Sagittarius. I'm a Sagittarius, and I can low key just see through his personality.
You stubborn fire signs.
I can just see we are determined people, and Ted was very determined to get the lady he wanted to choose for the evening and have his way.
Oh, yeah. You know that little thing that we have called a conscience? And it implements a little bit of natural, healthy fear when it comes to doing things we shouldn't do or aren't for our own good. Okay. Well, being that Ted Bundy was a diagnosed psychopath, and we will get more into the psychology in the end of our second episode, because we're going to break this in half for you, like we said. Where was I going with that? Him being a psychopath. Oh, yes. So one thing is fear was not, Ted Bundy did not feel fear the way he should.
No.
He didn't. And he didn't have a conscience that made him feel guilt the way most people do either. So that's crucial to know.
Right.
Sorry.
So out of psychopath or sociopath, because there's a big difference between the two, we're going to mark him as the psychopath.
He is. He is a diagnosed psychopath.
No remorse, doesn't care, does what he wants, and the fact of the matter is he still carried on a very normal life, which is why I'm going to break down a little bit of his early childhood and go into detail about his background, because to most people, especially when he first started doing all of his acts of craziness, people would not suspect him. He would be one of the last people, and most people, especially even when he was being tried, they defended him and felt bad for him. They're like, we're sorry, Ted, that you're having to go through all this, because they're pinning it on you. You're not the one.
Oh, yeah. Ted, so we just put together a couple of photos here at the beginning of our shared Google Doc of information that we've got. And Ted Bundy was absolutely a charming gentleman. In a very conservative way for that time, but he was very charming. He was handsome, like I said, in a conservative way, but he was also very manipulative. I don't think he started out that way, and I think you're going to get into that, but in his later life, he was very confident, he was very egotistical, and very determined, but he was also charming about it.
Right.
So a lot of women, and
later in his life,
he had
developed
groupies.
The charm.
He had groupies at the end.
Oh, he sure did.
And he married one of them.
Right. That's what I was about to say.
Mm-hmm.
His very last, which became his wife, that she was a groupie.
He did have one marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the end of his life, they did produce a child.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And
some way.
That would be Carol Boone, and we'll talk more about her later. But yeah, she was a groupie. He had groupies. Women couldn't believe that he was a killer.
Right. He started off, and obviously his life was very rocky at first.
Tell us about that.
He went through a couple of things that really fermented his character and who he would later become. We all have backstories. There's things that we've all been through that's really just made us who we are today. And I believe that several of the things that happened in his childhood really, really made up what he
affected his
what
development.
his legacy, his serial killer legacy.
Mm-hmm.
So I will just go over that in total of his career in murders and rapes. There were 20 that was confirmed officially that he had murdered. 30 had confessed.
So, but at the point that he died, there were 30 total confessed?
Yes.
Okay.
And there were 36 plus suspected.
Mm.
And if you add that up correctly, that's over 100 people. And the problem is he committed these crimes within the span of 4 years. From 1974 to 1978.
A boy was busy.
Right. Like, he didn't waste no time. He had an itching to kill, and he got to it. That's just like, wow.
Yeah, when he wanted it, when he needed it, oh, he got it.
Like, and just imagine how all the other people that were around him when he was his normal self, how they felt. I watched a mini documentary on his brother, his younger brother.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm.
And he said to just ever think back again on Ted Bundy is not a good thing for him, because none of the things that happened and how much love he had for his brother he doesn't have anymore, because he really realized like who his brother was. It was very chilling, and it's very sad just how much Ted Bundy affected his brother. It made me truly sad, because now he's living life and he can't move on from it.
That's a really interesting concept, and the only thing I can really compare it to, because I had not thought to look up anything from any of his siblings, but
right.
I did see a lot of documentaries where his mother was just distraught.
Right. Well, most of his family members,
she could not believe that her son was responsible for even the smallest of crimes that he committed. Mm-hmm. And as his mother, can you imagine? She said at some point, I think she said, we did not raise him this way.
Right.
I said it just like her, too. I remember her saying that.
We did not raise him this way.
We did not raise him that way.
I can just imagine how most of his family members feel now. Most of them are, like, incognito mode. They've ducked off. They don't want to... They don't want to be correlated. Of having the last
they don't want to be
Bundy.
Connected. There's no correlation there.
Right.
They have all surely got aliases.
It's too much. Everybody knows about them. Imagine them trying to enjoy a peaceful life and go walk about, and then someone, oh, your last name's Bundy? Ted Bundy? Question mark, question mark? Like, that would make me ashamed, too.
You know, but as bad as I feel for his family, I still just don't feel as bad as for the victims' families.
I feel bad for both sides. Because neither of the sides have asked for that.
I agree. Right. I agree, but it just... It's not quite as heavy on me as the families of these victims. Like, I maybe because I have a child that will one day be that age.
Right.
And maybe I'm biased, but I have a beautiful child.
So you worry about her well-being.
Absolutely.
100%. So now within the states that he did commit all of these crimes, it was California, Colorado, Idaho, Oregon, Utah, Washington, and then he ended up last in Florida.
Oh, yeah.
Now, my man's had a lot of convictions. Did you just...
I did. I went...
Sorry, bud.
I would have been the ones tailgating.
You commit the crime, you gonna do the time.
I would have tailgated.
Or you gonna lose your time.
I would have tailgated. Been one of those folks. Burn, Bundy, burn. I would have made t-shirts.
Burn, Bundy, burn.
At his execution.
Burn, Bundy, burn.
And a lot of people think that was just like...
on a grave.
A lot of people have referred to that as just being like a morbid thing, like tailgating at an execution. But I worked at the courthouse in my jurisdiction for a short period of time, and I witnessed 2 death sentences myself, and I saw I had to log thousands of pieces of evidence, and it just gave me a whole different perspective, I gotta tell you, having witnessed it.
So my boy had a lot of convictions in total. His very first, he started out with, he just got his hands a little dirty. It was a burglary, right?
Yes.
Yeah, oh yes, it was a burglary. Okay, and that was in, do we know a specific year?
We don't know the specific year. I did not include that. Granted, we have 22 pages of information here. Don't be angry at us for not having that date.
Right. Lots of dates, guys.
But burglary would go along with his psychosis, because he was thrill seeking. Again, with that lack of fear, burglary was fun for him. I don't think he stole out of necessity. I believe he stole for the thrill of it.
For the fun, for the sport.
Exactly.
Like, I know I can get away with this.
Yes.
This is super easy.
Yes.
And this was
he
just
was very, very intelligent. Yes.
This is the very beginning. This was the base of the crimes he would commit.
Right.
So then he would move on to kidnapping, in which he was sentenced 1 to 15 years in prison, and that was in 1976. He would later also be charged with 2 death sentences, one in 1979, the other in 1980, and he also escaped a couple of times. And I'm just briefly noting that. We'll get into detail more about the escapes. The first time he escaped, my boy spent about 6 days free. That was June 7th.
That's my birthday.
I know. I was looking at you. I'm like, I know I was going to say something about it.
I was going to roll past
so what's our deal, though, with connecting on the dates with Ted Bundy? Because he escaped on your birthday. We were born at the same time.
Well, I will tell you right now, if I was ever incarcerated, I would make my best attempt to escape.
I mean, he was already going down for a really long time, so might as well enjoy a couple more days out in the free world.
And also, too, he just wasn't as afraid as most people should be.
Right.
He'd gotten away with way too much already.
He didn't care. My boy just had balls.
So he spent 6 days out free. And wasn't it in Colorado, I believe? He was 6 days free in the Aspen, Colorado wilderness. Because I think I saw...
Yes, no, okay. Yeah, sorry. It took me a second. I was thinking, I'm like, because you covered a little bit more of that than what I
will
know.
cover... We'll get more into that later.
In the winter, but it's okay. It's fine.
He looked like
okay.
He had spent time with Bigfoot personally, and they had developed a friendship, and he was adapting to Bigfoot's lifestyle in the photograph of when he was recaptured.
Nice.
That's what I would say he looked like.
So the 6 days that he escaped was from June 7th to 1977.
To June 13th.
Yeah, 1977. And then the very last time, my boy spent a couple of months with freedom, and this was more nearing towards his death sentence, which the dates are December 30th, 1977 to February 15th, 1978.
In which time his infamous Florida crimes were committed.
Right.
And we'll just leave you with that teaser.
In the year of 1946, a young woman by the name of Eleanor Louise Cowell, being 22 years old at the time, would give birth to the Ted Bundy. And
I love how you said the Ted Bundy.
The Ted Bundy.
He really is the Ted Bundy.
He didn't start out as Ted Bundy. So he started out as Theodore Robert Cowell. And she would have him in a home for unwed mothers.
Ooh, taboo.
In Burlington, Virginia. Now, this was the Elizabeth Lund Maternity Home. And it's already a statement. This was back in 1946.
A very conservative time.
Yeah. If you weren't married and you had a child, you were a witch.
You were a witch.
Right.
It's not something that you would talk about at your Tupperware meeting with your women or your church group. It
might be the gossip that you talk about. Like,
it's the gossip you would try to avoid. Yeah. It's not as normal as it is today.
The Cowell's family's daughter is pregnant
at 22,
married,
and she's unwed.
Like, oh my own
spinster.
I just want to say that would be bashed in our generation now. Like, power to you if you're a single mom and you're still going through with having birth with a child. Like, you are a strong woman.
Oh yeah, to be a single mom at any given point. And I can speak from experience.
But they just, like, banished her off to this home.
Yeah, at that time especially, that's a level of difficult that I can't understand.
Right. And they spent about 2 months there after Ted was born. So I don't know if that was just, like, in the process of trying to figure out what they were going to do, what their cover story was going to be. The grandparents, which was Eleanor Louise's mom and dad, they would claim Ted as their child. They would introduce Eleanor Louise to Ted as his sister. And that is also another funky situation. It makes sense as to why they would do that, but imagine all the people that seen Eleanor Louise pregnant previously.
Ted took it really...
members that like, knew about it.
Ted would take it really personally later.
Right. I just think that it was just a shitty way of trying to wrap up and cover something that really wasn't all that shameful to begin with. It was just shameful.
Yeah, you think they should have just owned it?
I think they definitely should have just explained to him what the situation was.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fine.
What would have been wrong with just having helpful grandparents? Your mother raising you and having very involved grandparents.
Right. Like, my parents divorced when I was 3, and my grandparents helped out a lot. And, I mean, I would, like, call my mom sometimes because I was around her a little bit more than I was my mom. But it wasn't...
I mean, I wouldn't say you're totally normal, but you wouldn't kill anybody.
No, I definitely wouldn't kill anybody, no. So, she spent, as I said, 2 months in this home with Ted until they were ready to actually come home, and his life just was already so difficult at such a young age. It didn't help that they had absolutely no clue as to who was the father. There were several suspects on the roster. The first one was the name of Lloyd Marshall, who was an Air Force veteran. He was also a Penn State grad. And Louise would kind of allude later in some personal interviews that she might have possibly been taken advantage of by him.
Okay, so that could range on a scale anywhere from they just had too much to drink. Either way, it's wrong if it's not consensual.
Right.
But she didn't really open up to say, hey, we had too much to drink and I didn't really want to do it, but I said okay.
Right.
Or she was
easy,
raped. You know what I mean?
Raped.
We don't know.
Right.
Somewhere
and that
in there.
kind of just makes a little bit more sense.
That's what I'm saying. She kept her stuff under wraps.
Right. If you got pregnant and you really don't know who the dad is, it could have been a drunken situation. Or she could have just, like, genuinely just, like, slept with somebody, didn't mean for it to go like that, but then got a very special surprise. A very, very special surprise.
Or she could have been raped, because I'm just going to say, that is always a possibility.
Right. Another name that was thrown into the mix was something that I know you're heated about.
I don't like this name.
Jack Worthington. Jack Worthington was a name thrown into the mix, and to us, it kind of just sounds like a character from some story tale, and it just...
Well, it's like Jack is the most basic name I could think of. Like Jack and Jill.
Right. It's like Bob.
Yeah, and then the last name, Worthington.
He was Worthington of being Ted's father.
So, and wasn't there, like, no record of a Jack Worthington anywhere?
No. Like, if you try to go look up anything under the name of Jack Worthington related to Ted Bundy, nothing pops up.
Yeah, so...
There was nothing to prove there that even a Jack Worthington even existed at the time.
So I'm really inclined to believe that she just wanted to present her son with something somewhat acceptable.
Right. And Jack Worthington was it. There was one last suspect to the situation, and that was his grandpa. And his grandpa, his name was Samuel. And he was known to be an abusive and aggressive person. So the dots kind of connected. And I was like, could be a little incest situation. Maybe.
So he was physically abusive, maybe possibly sexually abusive as well.
Yes.
And that theory has a lot of meat to it. Mm-hmm. I've talked to a lot of different people, and I've watched a lot of different documentaries and listened to a lot of different podcasts, and
even if you look up articles, that's all they say.
They'll state it as fact.
Right.
Some places it states it as fact.
They'll really just be like, oh yeah, and possibly Grandpa was the daddy, and then they'll literally just stop at that.
Yeah, they won't give you any.
It just makes your mind roll, and you're like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah, like where did that come from? Where did that theory come from? But it does. I mean, honestly, I don't want to say juicy. That sounds bad, but like
it is juicy. It just adds more. It adds more flavor to the story.
Yeah, like it just deepens.
But this isn't a story. This is
just adds
life.
more poop to the bucket. The bucket of yuck.
Right. However, I will say that I did look up on Samuel's death certificate, and it states that in 2020, the University of Yale proved that there were no signs of homozygosity, which is a key indicator of incest.
Say that again, my girl. Say that again, because so which university presented this?
The University of Yale. In
Yale?
2020.
2020.
Yes, proved.
Proved.
They did a test. There were no signs of homozygosity, and that's a key indicator of incest. So the rumor, shut the fuck down.
It has been debunked. You heard it here. If you've not heard it anywhere else before,
he's not the daddy.
He is not the daddy. Grandpa may have been one of the worst influences in the world for Ted Bundy, and he was. My girl will tell you. but he was not the father.
Mm-mm.
He was not the result. Ted Bundy was not the result.
Yeah, he's bad, but he ain't that bad.
Nope.
Now, this whole daddy situation and mommy being sissy situation is just already like very dirty and messy. And obviously you can understand like little Ted's mind didn't know where to turn. He didn't know what to believe. Now, there was several rumors as to how he actually found out about his father.
Or their lack of.
Or who the father was. And how he found out about his mom. Ted was a compulsive liar.
The information that we have that has been given in this regard is from Ted Bundy's own mouth. And anything and everything he says his entire life has to be taken with a grain of salt.
Or what he's told, people that he grew up with, peers, coworkers. So they could only do as much as they could to piece together what is true and what is not true. This is one of those cases where nobody really actually knows deep into the mind of Ted Bundy and what he was really thinking, what actually really happened, because he deterred from the truth a lot.
We can venture to imagine at what he might have felt when he realized, okay, my grandfather and my grandmother are not my parents. My sister is my mother. And who is my father? Do I have a father? Where is he? Like,
right.
All of that as a whole, his coming out of an understanding of that could be very traumatic. I could see it being very traumatic.
Now, I will say that when he was 3 years old, him and Eleanor Louise would move. And I'm under the pretenses that when he moved with her, he still thought that she was his sister, but had suspicions. Now, they mentioned during his childhood of a cousin kind of prodding and poking at him about being illegitimate. And
oh yeah, and at that time, if you were an illegitimate bastard child,
right.
kids can be mean, man.
For sure. So, I mean, cousin joked around with him.
You have no daddy.
Proved him wrong, showed him the certificate, which I think it's kind of odd that, like, a cousin would just, like, whip out a birth certificate and just be like, bam, I'm teasing you, and you...
Yeah, like...
Forget it.
That cousin would really have to hate Ted to be like, I'm gonna go find his birth certificate and check his lineage. And, like, where would he even get the idea? Maybe he could have heard talk from maybe other family members or something. I don't know, but...
it just leads you to wonder.
Yeah, we don't know exactly when or how he found out. There's different theories. So
there's another one. Whenever he was a teenager, it said that he sat down with a psychologist and he recalled finding his own birth certificate and just realizing on his own that by the sign of father that it said unknown.
Well, that makes the most sense to me.
Now, there's also talk that he found out 20 years later, when he was in his 20s, about his mother actually being his mother actually being his mother.
Wow. So we really don't know how long he was under that. Wow. Okay.
So I'm going to repeat that last bit again just because I kind of said that funny. But there's also talk as well as when he found out about his mom.
You're good.
There is also talk of when he found out about his sister actually being his mom. And that kind of alludes to maybe like 20 years down the road. So it's kind of lots of question marks around there as to when he actually found out. But obviously by the time that he got to trial, he knew that was his mom. So
yeah, we read a lot of different theories. So this is kind of a good place to for any of you listeners, if you happen to know or have a credible site information, we, like I said, are going to provide you with our email at the end of this episode. Please do let us know. Send us your info. We will read it and we will correct ourselves, or we will state it as fact, if you know what I'm saying. So we would appreciate that.
Right.
I just wanted to interject with that.
Right. So I'm going to find my space here. I will say that we've mentioned that a couple of times, just like telling people to like come in, but it's okay. We will cut out as needed.
Okay.
1 second. Now I've been through this. Okay. So for Ted, especially growing up, he just literally could not fathom the idea that he was a bastard child. There have been reports of certain childhood friends that would even try to like make him feel better and be like, hey, it's okay, it's not your fault. But he would retaliate with, well, it's not you that's a bastard. So Ted really took this very harshly growing up. And he kind of just circled around the fact that he was a bastard child. He just couldn't let it go. That's one characteristic of a psychopath. Anything that they cannot change or control, it really bothers them. So this really bothered Ted.
He was very narcissistic as well. He cared a lot about his image. And he did not, by any means, want to be considered less than any other of his peers.
Right, he just wanted to be like everyone else.
Or maybe even better. Like I said, he was definitely a little bit of a narcissist. I think he wanted to, at minimum, be normal and not have those things related to him, such as his home life situation.
Right. Because on the outside, his family looked like they were this white picket fence family.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was perfect. I'm sure that molded him. I'm sure not knowing really who his dad was molded him. And then kind of having suspicions about his sister being his mother. That kind of just like, he was thinking in his head, like, if it were me, I just think, like, am I not worthy enough to know the truth? Am I not cared enough that my father didn't want to step up to the plate and father me? You know? So a lot of things going through his mind, and these are normal human emotions, ones that he's allowed to feel. And we can feel bad for him for a second, just because, like, damn, you deserved a little bit better than that. Even though later you go on to do worse things.
Oh,
he
yeah.
still at least deserved to know the truth.
With any villain,
personally.
what makes him a good villain? Not to say he's a good anything, but what makes a good villain? It's the backstory.
Right.
It's the backstory. You feel something for them.
100%.
But the direction he took with it,
right.
I just cracked my toes.
I heard it.
The direction he went was absolutely of his choosing individually.
Right. You control what future you make for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Absolutely.
Sometimes it is hard to come out of your roots if you don't ever steer away. But Ted prevailed many different opportunities where he could have turned his life around for the better.
He was not about to be a victim, and he was not about to be any less than anyone else.
Right. Now, he didn't really have the best role models. Now, Samuel Nechkowal, which was his grandpa, was a very abusive, sexist, and racist man. And Ted, when he ever spoke about his grandpa, he would only mention the great relationship that they had. He would say he thought his grandpa was the prime example of a man and a prime example of a head of household. So that right there, he thought that was what a man should be. And that was his first impression. That was his first example of a man that he had to look up to. So obviously, like, he was already corrupted from the get-go. If he thought that's how a man should treat anybody.
Or anything. Wasn't he abusive towards animals too?
Yes. So
Trigger warning!
Yeah, it is mentioned that he touched everyone from dogs to cats to family members and employees that he worked with.
Oh, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy. Like, we knew he was gonna kill people, but and hurting pets is such a precursor.
Right. Like, God forbid I watch all of these, like, TV shows where they're murdering so many people. But let them touch the dog.
Don't take me to see Marley and Me.
Right, and I'm crying.
No.
Let the dog die, and I'm freaking crying.
No.
Now, Samuel, to the outside world, was a normal person. He was a railroad clerk. He was a prideful gardener. He was even the chairman of the Roxborough Gardening Club. Now,
so outwardly, he seemed like he was well-rounded.
Yes. To most people on the outside, which is your average abusive person, especially someone which he seems like he was mentally abusive as well.
So Grandpa seems very manipulative as well, which is where I'm thinking maybe Ted picked up a lot of those tactics.
Right.
Control tactics.
Monkey see, monkey do.
Mm-hmm.
And like we have already said, this is his first example of what a man should be.
And as a parent, you cannot teach your kids do as I say and not as I do.
Right.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work that way.
It does not.
Well, it's even been found, one of his family members had mentioned that when Ted was very young, and this is when he was like in preschool, he would sneak out to the greenhouse that Samuel had. And that's where Samuel hid his horrifying, gory porn. Now, this isn't just your regular porn. This is, like, abusive porn.
Like sadomasochism,
Yes.
but it went a little bit beyond that, too.
Right.
It was a lot of bondage. Not very vanilla.
No. Being a young person.
That's such a
Being a
young
preschooler.
age. Such a young
And
age.
looking at things like that,
Mm-hmm.
he just got the whole wrong idea.
He's going to carry that with him for the rest of his life.
For the rest of
and
his
he
life.
did. And even in his last confessions, he blamed a lot of why he became what he became on porn. Specifically, that type of porn. Extraordinarily influential.
Right. Also, like, because apparently Samuel couldn't have been that shy about having those things lying around if little Ted at a preschool age would know that it's in his greenhouse.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, it does make sense to me, but it also doesn't make sense why you would just have that stuff sitting out there.
Well, it could have been like a greenhouse / man cave shed, something, you know what I mean? Like, it could have been his own personal space where, like,
Right.
wifey wasn't allowed in, no one else was allowed in.
His little man cave gardening area.
Yeah.
I guess you could say.
So after he, like, beat some dogs, beat some cats, beat his wife,
He'd go and garden.
manipulated Ted a little bit, he'd go and garden. He'd go check on his tomatoes.
It helped calm him down. Maybe that's why Samuel never murdered anybody, is because he gardened, and that really just helped him take out his frustrations.
Yeah, Ted, why didn't you garden?
Why didn't you not garden, Ted? So, our wonderful Samuel was married to Eleanor Miriam Cowell. Now, it's very easy to get Eleanor Louise and Eleanor Miriam confused. Eleanor Louise is the actual mom, aka sister, and Eleanor Miriam is grandma.
So can we call just so me and everyone doesn't get...
She said so I don't get confused.
Yeah. Can we call grandma's Miriam and mom's Louise?
Yes. Now, Miriam, our beautiful lady, we don't really hear too much about her. She had a lot of issues, especially when Ted was growing up. She had manic depression.
Ooh.
And she also had agoraphobia.
Ooh.
Which is basically the fear of space. She feared if she left the house, all the possibilities of things that could go wrong, she contemplated. And she kind of was just a stay-at-home type of person.
Whereas Ted felt very little fear and was thrill-seeking, agoraphobia is the polar opposite. Mm-hmm. Many of them cannot even leave their own home dwelling to grocery shop, and it's really unfortunate.
It's what I wanted to say, and I was calling it this last week. I was saying it's the fear of fear. You're basically just like...
It is.
You're fearing fear. You're fearing anything that could possibly happen.
It's like anxiety to the max. Like, can you imagine? I don't even want to imagine that.
Right.
Oh, that's horrible.
Right.
Poor grandma. And she was getting beat.
Possibly.
I heard grandpa was beating them.
She said, I heard grandpa was beating him.
I heard it.
Now, since she rarely ever left the house, it just makes me believe that Ted being around several people that just have kind of wonky characters. He's not only around grandpa, who's abusive and crazy and racist and all these other things. He's also around his grandma, which is just shut out from the world. Due to her agoraphobia, this caused her to rarely leave the house, and we kind of see that she's a standoff character in Ted's life. Her manic depression really kept her from probably doing the things that she would wish that she could have done for Ted, for her husband.
She was probably not very involved. Depression can make you feel so heavy, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Even the smallest tasks seem impossible.
Right. Getting out of bed was, I can imagine,
hard enough.
Yeah, harder.
So to be nurturing, I can only imagine how difficult that must
and
have
then
been.
also as well too, they tried giving her electroshock therapy.
Oh my gosh! So Grandpa had a garden, growing vegetables, and decided he was gonna make his wifey a vegetable too, and that was just gonna fix the problem.
I guess so.
And for those of you who are not familiar with electroshock therapy, it is not commonly used today. It is a very severe practice, and many practicing doctors today would not even entertain the idea of electric shock therapy unless it was of the most extreme nature.
Ted and Louise would move when he was 3 years old. They would make this move to Tacoma, Washington, where it is rumored that she gave him the last name of Nelson when they moved into the town, just to kind of hide him.
He didn't have any last name, or was it Cowell? Did she change it?
It was still government Cowell, but I think that Nelson is what she used when she would introduce him to people.
Okay.
However, I am not sure of the accuracy of this claim. Now, as he grew up, he would resent the move, and he'd miss Philadelphia, in which he'd interchangeably go see Grandma and Grandpa, and that's how he was still in contact with aunts and uncles and all that jazz. So he's still seen his family, even though him and his mother had moved away. Now, not only did his atmosphere change drastically by changing states, his life would also change a lot when his mother would meet Johnny Bundy, when she got his last name from.
Famous moniker.
Now, Johnny Bundy was a great, outstanding gentleman, and that's why Louise, I feel like, really fell for him. He didn't care that Louise had a child out of wedlock, and he was really ready to step up to the plate and take that commitment. And they would even marry. They would happily marry in 1951, and Johnny would adopt Ted. However, Ted was not okay with this. He did not like this random man.
He didn't like Johnny Bundy?
No. He did not care for Johnny Bundy at all. During the process of their engagement, he would have been known to one time throw a fit in Sears, throw a complete tantrum in front of everybody in the store, and to even top off the cherry of the cake, he would piss himself. He would literally pee himself in public in efforts to try to scare Johnny Bundy away from Louise.
Wow. Well, I mean, like, if he was treating her right, I don't... But, he obviously, if he was treating her right, wasn't anything like Grandpa, and he'd already looked up to Grandpa as...
Right. So, in Ted's eyes, he probably looked at Johnny and was like, you're weak.
Yeah.
You're not a man. You're not a head of household. Well, he would even... Despite his best efforts to try to scare Johnny away... Obviously, Johnny still prevailed. And he didn't have a father.
I was going to say, it's not unknown for children to act out when their parent... Oh, yeah, I mean... Yeah.
When
being
I was
a single parent and dating...
My parents got divorced. And when my mom would bring around boyfriends, I wouldn't like it. I'd be like, who the fuck is this? I don't know who this is. It's very confusing when you're young and you don't understand that mommy deserves love.
Every time. For them too.
Right. It's a change. It's something that you have to get used to. Now that I'm older, I see the real true value. Everyone deserves love. Everyone needs to be loved. Can I hit that whenever you're done?
If you'd like. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know you were feeling it.
Regardless of Johnny stepping to the plate to be not only the man of Louise's dreams, but being a stepfather to Ted, their relationship would grow to be very stressful. Despite Johnny just trying to be the best stepfather that he absolutely could, Ted was a very materialistic person. Now, Johnny, he worked as an army hospital cook, and I'm pretty sure they were a little bit under middle class.
I was going to say, that kind of sounds like a lower middle class to middle class, but still respectable.
Right.
Average
They made
living.
it by.
Okay.
And that wasn't good enough for Ted. Right. He was embarrassed. He was embarrassed of Johnny. And there were things that Johnny just could not provide for Ted. And being the psychopath that he is, that was something that was out of his control. So that bothered him.
Okay, well, his grandpa had a vegetable problem and was a terrible guy, so... Just saying.
I don't think Ted really realized that at his young age. Because Ted fantasized about having... There were two Western stars that were super wealthy. Their names were Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. He fantasized about having them adopt him one day. Cowboy. They were cowboys in a Western. So, they just wanted, a firm rancher.
Yeah.
You think? Maybe a firm rancher or what do I want to say? I would say the police, but maybe a bandit.
I would love to be the daughter of the actress that plays Clarice Starling in Silence of the Lamb. I know her name. I know her name. and she's very intelligent, and I adore her as an actress. But for whatever reason, I cannot remember her name right now. Sorry.
No, you're okay. It's fine.
I would love to be her daughter. Not that I don't love my mama. Mama, I love you.
It would be nice. I think as you get older, you really realize how much you are appreciative of what you did grow up with. Because I think that if I really was rich and I had everything that I wanted, I feel like I would just, first of all, not want to achieve anything in life because I already have it. And two, I wouldn't really understand the true meaning of enjoying something because it was just handed off to me so
well, it's like
early.
kids not understanding the concept of money, that someone had to work to make that money to buy what it is that you want.
100%. I just think, but this is a young mind. We're in the young mind of Ted right now, and he's not seeing that big picture later. So
you hear the thunder outside, guys, by the way. If you hear any booming, that's the thunder.
In the background. It's really soothing, though.
Yeah,
it's
honestly,
nice and
this closet's
enjoyable.
not that bad. It's just a little toasty in here.
I mean, I'm pretty gooch, but I'm also right by the door, so the air
I'm like
is
sitting
flowing
crisscross
under the door for
applesauce,
me.
and I have like sweat in between my calf and my thigh, like in my knees, or like.
Here.
Anyway.
So their stressful relationship would continue to stay the same, most likely for the duration of their relationship. And it really was significant because Ted would do things on purpose to really piss off Johnny and to really get Johnny out of his normal character.
Beyond
he would frustrate
beyond
Johnny
just pissing himself in a Sears.
Oh yeah. Oh, especially when Ted was a teenager and his little friends were around, he would do things to make Johnny feel dumb. He'd undermine his intelligence, basically. Despite the rough and rocky relationship that Ted and Johnny would develop, his mother, Louise, and Ted would go on to have 4 more children of their own, in which Mr. Ted really felt pushed off to the side and unloved. Mainly because he probably wanted to be the center of attention.
That's exactly what I was thinking too. Yeah, I mean, no, I remember my sister is 4 years my younger. You don't say elder. 4 years my younger. And I remember when she was born, I remember being really cranky about it. Like, I was not the center of attention. That's normal.
Right.
But he didn't want to have anything to do with him either, didn't he?
It's another thing of being a psychopath. He's not the center of attention and he's not all that matters.
Yeah. And
it's not something that he wants. So it bothers him.
And he can't, it's just less he can control.
And that's just competition. Now he's got, not only does he have a stepfather that he doesn't actually want in his life, do we even know if he knows that that's his stepfather? We're still unsure. But now he's surrounded by 4 more little shits and he has to compete for the center of attention. It's difficult and rough to him, but Louise was allowed to move on and have more kids with a man who truly loved her.
Well, good.
So, in most little interviews, I watched like one of his like last hearings. They sat down and they kind of just asked him like, you know, what was the relationship between you and your mom? How would you say your life was growing up? And he firmly says that he feels like she fed him, kept a roof over his head, took care of him to his basic needs. He doesn't mention anything of feeling
so what he needed
affection.
So what he needed to physically survive, but no.
Right. She just barely did it.
Okay. Yeah.
She did it just good enough.
Just the necessities. The simple bare necessities.
Yeah, like he gives her not that much credit. He doesn't really, thank you, Mom. Thank you, Mom, you did what you could. It wasn't enough. That was basically how his perspective. Just his materialism really just came into play. Now, as a little toddler, Ted had tendencies. There were several occasions. The first one I'm going to mention is from his Aunt Julia Cowell, who was sleeping and awoke to a little young Ted at the edge of her bed with knives surrounded around her, just giggling. He just placed knives around her as she was sleeping. And
yeah. No, I would take that situation straight to the pediatrician.
Right. Something's not right with my kid.
No, Nope, no.
Fix him.
No, no. His hand coordination is good. But knives?
That's hella questionable. Well, she later admitted to Vanity Fair, saying that she swore there was something wrong with him, and she tried to, like, raise attention to, like, there's something wrong with this kid. He's playing around with knives at a really young age. And nobody did anything.
Well, yeah, that was the time. They really didn't do much.
There were warning signs.
Yeah, and that in this time period, they were much more ignored. Especially, I mean, it was at that time it was taboo just for you to have a mental disorder in any form.
Right.
If you had mild depression,
I don't even think they were
postpartum
aware.
depression, if you had anxiety, it was just different.
I don't think they were aware of actual health issues, mental health issues. I don't think they were aware of mental health issues.
I think everybody in that family was just, except maybe grandma, was just way too concerned with what the neighbors thought of them. Or what their peers thought of them.
Or they were just solely comfortable with their ways. They didn't see anything wrong with how they were living. Was the thing. But Auntie seen, she knew.
Auntie knew.
She had suspicions, and still nothing was done.
TT knew.
So he also was a little shit when he was in Boy Scouts. So in Boy Scouts, he was known to make what is called a tiger trap. He'd dig a little hole in the dirt, and may or may not have put like rocks or something pokey in there, may or may not have, and he would cover it with foliage, little debris, let's put a little bit of grass over it. And so when his little Boy Scouts were walking, and even one time he did it to a little girl, they'd fall into the hole and hurt themselves. He has violent tendencies.
He was just getting away with everything.
I'm not trying to, like, give him excuses, but, like, clearly there was definitely something wrong with his mental, and there's a lot of things wrong with his surroundings. Now, they tried, and I'm sure they really gave it the best that they could to, like, make a bad situation into a semi-good situation. I mean, the family was Christian. They went to a Methodist church, and
so that's a pretty conservative religious upbringing.
Right.
I mean, it installs or is supposed to implement morals and good behavior.
Right. But not necessarily because you're going to church does that mean that
you abide by that.
An actual good person.
So a couple years beyond that, Ted did make an effort to try to be an upstanding younger gentleman, to get the attention of elders. I don't buy that he endeavored to be a good person. I don't think he ever at any point thought, you know what, I'm going to just try to be moralistic today. Mm-hmm. I don't think so. I don't think that's it.
So you think that...
So I think that he was... yes, he was absolutely... Any effort to progress himself was for advancement in life somehow. Whether it be in stature, money,
so you think
specifically
he only
stature.
did certain things if it was value to him? If he would gain
That's what I'm saying. That
so
saving that girl, I think it was for the infamy. I think he wanted...
He just
the
wanted
pats
that
on the
image.
backs.
Yeah.
He wanted the pat on the back for that.
And to feel
and then,
good. Like
yeah, and it probably
did.
And at that point, he tried to raise through the ranks of the church. He probably wanted to seem like an upstanding young gentleman to gain some stature.
So that was his act of kindness. Like, if he didn't save her, that would have been like, what? Dude, why didn't you save her? So he had to do it because he would have been the bad guy if he didn't. Or someone else would have, hopefully, saved her. Now, he was a big fan of watching pulpy detective fiction stories with scenes of gore-filled rape and murder. He took a very big liking to that.
So he liked true crime.
So he was a fan of true crime.
Specifically, like rape nature true crime. Non-consensual. Brutal and non-consensual.
Still being in high school, being his socially awkward self, it was known that he would occasionally get into the janitor closet and he would whack one off.
Okay, but I feel like that's pretty normal for a teenage boy.
But in a janitor closet in high school, like, he'd actually just, like, be at school and just have to whack one off in the closet.
Boys at his age would literally, I don't want to say screw anything, but screw anything. You know what I mean?
So he was just horny.
I don't do
He was
that.
just
I didn't do
horny,
that
baby.
in school, but
He was just
since
horny,
I've been
baby.
an adult, I've done that.
Rubbed one off in the janitor closet.
No,
I'm sorry.
specific-
I
not
will
specifically
not
in
be
the
able to
janitor's
get over
closet.
that. I'll not be able to get over that. No. During all this masturbation in the closet, during all this masturbation in the closet,
While we're hanging out here in the closet.
while we're hanging out here in the closet, our boy would also pick up a thieving habit in high school. He would shoplift ski gear and equipment. Our boy was an avid skier. He loved having a good little time at the slopes. And he even found a little hobby out of it, where
And
he'd start
that-
stealing.
Him being into skiing is a reoccurring fact, because some of his victims are tied into the fact, or tied into his love for skiing.
Right. He comes back to the ski.
To
He
the
said-
ski. He comes back to the ski to
the
do
ski.
the deed.
Now, not only would he steal the ski equipment, he would also forge tickets so he could get free rides on the slope. So, I mean, at least
He was
used
like,
his
you know
thieving
what?
for like a kind of innocent way. He'd steal, but
yeah,
he just
yeah.
wanted to ski.
Well, he was at
Right.
the stage of burglary.
So Bundy trying to steal that car was let off on a warning, and he got very lucky with that.
So once again, he's getting away with crime.
Because Charlie goes into a lot more detail in our part 2 about what happens in college, because that's when he really takes up his murderous addiction, to be honest with you. Something really just sets him off, and instead of stealing and doing little small mini crimes, he just fully goes ballistic and decides to go off the ringer. After closely looking at Ted Bundy's roots and foundations, we start to get an understanding of Bundy, just as Bundy starts to understand his own urges. It went from booby traps to thieving and peeping, but in the years to come, a soon-to-be serial killer was definitely in the making, for sure. After closely looking at Ted Bundy's roots and foundations, we start to get an understanding of Bundy, just as Bundy starts to get an understanding of his own urges. It went from booby traps to thieving and even peeping, but in the years to come, a soon-to-be serial killer was definitely in the making.
So, after graduating from Woodrow Wilson High School in 1965, Bundy attended the University of Puget Sound, or Puget Sound, I've heard it pronounced both ways, for 1 year before transferring to the University of Washington to study Chinese. Bundy would drop out of the University of Washington after his first love, Diane Edwards, ended their relationship. And that is where we're going to leave you for the end of this episode. This relationship would be very crucial in the victimology of a rising serial killer. So now that we're coming to a close, I do want to say for our very first episode, thank you for hanging in. I know it's definitely going to be rocky. We are just trying to honestly do our best, I would say, and really learn how we can communicate to you guys a little bit better. But I really just want to thank all of the supporters and everyone that's just listening in and has been so very supportive just at the idea, and anytime that I do take some time to dedicate my time to this. The support is just unreal, and I really appreciate it. And I look forward to the next episode. Charlie, how do you feel? Yeah, the same. So a month's worth of research, 22 pages of research, 5 days of attempted recording, and it was a little horrific at times. And we ultimately ended up camped out in a closet, sweating our balls off. Happy to present this information to you guys.
Parables are big.
What?
Parables are big.
Yes, very big. We do have a really strong group of supporters so far. You guys have been following us since we first announced the idea, since I first interviewed for my co-host, for my partner, my Shay baby. You guys were with us whenever we got our first little Instagram up and our little, what is that little picture called? What is our picture called?
A picture.
Okay, listen, this is just goes to show you a little bit of the
Our
age,
brains are fried
the age
at this
difference
point.
between us here. We have an Instagram.
We do.
We do.
Please follow us at we.the.jurypodcast on Instagram. And also, if you do have an inquiry, you're
Or a
curious
request.
about something, a question, anything, please, at We the Jury Podcast